The forest of Eldrath was alive with shadows. Mist curled between the twisted trees like silent ghosts, and the wind whispered secrets only the leaves could understand. Every step through the damp undergrowth made Lyanna's legs ache, but she pressed on. Her basket was nearly empty, save for a few herbs she had collected, and her village depended on her. Yet something deeper drew her further into the forest that day, a faint, pitiful cry that shivered through the fog. Lyanna's heart tightened. She paused, straining to hear again. The sound came once more, a whimper, soft but desperate, echoing from beneath a fallen tree. She quickened her pace, pushing aside wet branches until she came upon a small clearing. There, trapped beneath the trunk, was a tiny wolf cub, its fur matted with mud and its small body trembling. "Oh, you poor thing," Lyanna whispered, dropping to her knees. The cub struggled weakly, its eyes wide with fear. She could feel her own exhaustion like a heavy cloak, but her hands moved automatically, testing the ground and attempting to lift the tree. It would not budge. Sweat ran down her brow, her muscles screaming in protest. "Come on, little one. I won't let anything happen to you," she murmured. She gritted her teeth and pushed with every ounce of strength left in her. The wood shifted slightly, then settled with a low groan. Her fingers scraped against bark and stone, and she felt the sting of splinters. Another push, her arms trembling violently, and at last the tree shifted enough for her to free the cub. The wolf cub scrambled toward her, trembling but alive. Lyanna reached out and held it close, feeling its tiny heartbeat flutter against her own. Relief washed over her in waves, but it was fleeting. Her vision blurred. The effort had taken everything from her. She sank backward onto the cold forest floor, still clutching the cub. Darkness crept at the edges of her vision. The last thing she felt before losing consciousness was a low, echoing growl. When Lyanna opened her eyes, she was no longer on the forest floor. A chill wind brushed her face, but it was different from the forest air, clean, sharp, and heavy with an unspoken power. She tried to move, but found herself cradled in strong arms. Above her loomed a figure cloaked in shadow, with eyes that gleamed like the stormy sky. "Stay still," the figure commanded, voice deep and smooth, carrying both authority and warning. Lyanna's breath caught. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry, her voice barely a whisper. The figure bent closer, inspecting her with a sharp intensity. Then he turned, carrying her through the misty forest with a speed and grace that seemed impossible for a human. His presence filled the air like the forest itself was holding its breath. After what felt like hours, they arrived at a fortress perched on a cliff, its spires rising into the clouds. Wolves padded silently around the gates, their eyes glinting in the dim light. The figure lowered her gently onto a soft bed in a chamber warmed by a hearth. Lyanna tried to sit up, fear and awe twisting inside her, but the figure placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You are safe, for now," he said. "But this forest is no place for one like you." Who are you?" she managed to whisper, her voice hoarse. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he studied her as if weighing her soul. Finally, he spoke. "I am Kaelin. I am the Alpha of these lands." Lyanna's heart stuttered. She had heard tales of the Alpha King, ruler of Eldrath, master of the wolves, a man who walked between worlds of humans and beasts, feared and revered alike. And here he was, standing before her, his presence immense, both terrifying and magnetic. I only tried to save the cub," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I didn't mean to trespass." Kaelin's eyes softened slightly, though his expression remained unreadable. "You have courage," he said simply. "Few humans would risk themselves for another life, even one so small." Lyanna felt a warmth bloom in her chest. The fear did not disappear, but something else stirred. Curiosity and perhaps a strange spark of trust. She glanced toward the corner of the room where the cub now lay on a pile of soft furs, still trembling but safe. You saved it?" Kaelin asked, though not unkindly. "I couldn't leave it," she admitted. Her voice was quiet, but firm. It was helpless. Kaelin studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then perhaps you are not like the others," he said. His tone held an odd mixture of judgment and fascination. "Yet your presence here is dangerous. This forest is cursed. Shadows move where they should not, and those who enter uninvited rarely leave." Lyanna swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking into her chest. I will leave if you let me," she said, though her exhaustion made her doubt she could even make the journey. "You are not ready to leave," Kaelin replied, almost softly, "and neither is this forest ready to let you go." He turned, leaving the warmth of the hearthlight, and moments later returned with a small cup of herbal tea. "Drink. You will need your strength. Tomorrow we will speak further." Lyanna accepted the cup, grateful for the warmth seeping into her hands. As she sipped, she felt a strange connection forming, a thread of understanding between the human who loved life and the king who commanded death. The night passed slowly. Every so often the faint sound of wolf howls drifted through the fortress walls, sending shivers down her spine. She could not sleep, not entirely, for her mind raced with questions. Who was Kaelin truly? Was he as fearsome as the legends said? And why did his gaze feel less like judgment and more like recognition? At dawn, Lyanna awoke to the scent of pine and firelight. The cub stirred beside her, nudging her hand with its tiny nose. She laughed softly, the sound breaking the heavy silence. Kaelin stood near the window, watching the mist swirl over the cliffs. "You are awake," he said, his voice low, carrying both curiosity and something unspoken. "Yes," Lyanna replied, brushing hair from her face. "The cub. It is safe." Kaelin's lips curved in the faintest hint of a smile. "Indeed, you have courage and a heart that defies exhaustion and fear. Such traits are rare. Perhaps you belong here more than you realize." Lyanna's eyes widened. Belong here. She did not understand. She was a healer, a human, a girl from a village far below the cliffs. Yet something in Kaelin's voice made her shiver, not from fear, but from the pull of something ancient and powerful. Before she could ask further, a shadow passed across the window, dark and swift. Kaelin's eyes narrowed instantly. The wolves outside growled low in unison. "What is that?" Lyanna asked, fear creeping into her chest. Kaelin did not answer. He strode to the window, eyes scanning the misty forest. His presence shifted, commanding the room as if the air itself bent to his will. "Trouble approaches," he said finally. "You must remain inside. Nothing is as it seems in Eldrath. This forest tests the brave and punishes the reckless." Lyanna's pulse quickened. She wanted to protest, to insist she could help, but the weight of exhaustion and the strange authority in Kaelin's stance kept her silent. She glanced at the cub, now curled into a small ball, and realized she felt responsible, not only for it but for herself, now caught in a world far larger and stranger than she had ever imagined. Kaelin turned back to her, his gaze intense. "You saved a life today," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Few have the courage to act when the danger is unknown. Remember that, Lyanna. Your actions have consequences. For you, and for all you touch." The words sent a shiver down her spine. They were not threatening, but they carried weight, like a prophecy waiting to unfold. Hours passed in silence. The cub slept at her feet. The fire crackled in the hearth, and Lyanna's mind wandered. Who was this Alpha King truly? Why did his presence feel like both a warning and a promise? And what did he mean by the forest testing the brave? The sun dipped behind the cliffs and the mist thickened once more. Leanna felt the pull of the forest even within the fortress walls, a whisper of shadows that promised both danger and revelation. That night she dreamt of the wolf cub again, of its small body pressed against hers, its eyes wide with fear. But in her dream, the shadows moved differently. They were alive, watching her, testing her, and at the center of it all, a figure loomed, tall, powerful, with eyes that seemed to pierce through her very soul. She could not speak, could not move, only watch as the figure extended a hand toward her, and the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Leanna awoke with a start, her heart pounding. She was no longer alone. Kalen stood at the doorway, the faint moonlight catching the edges of his cloak. His expression was unreadable, but his gaze was fixed on her. "You cannot yet leave this place," he said softly, almost as if he were answering the question she had not spoken aloud. "And perhaps you do not wish to, not entirely." Leanna met his gaze, a strange mix of fear, curiosity, and longing twisting inside her. She did not know why she felt it, but something unspoken had begun, a thread connecting the human and the Alpha King, the healer and the ruler of wolves. Outside, the forest stirred again, its whispers carrying a promise and a warning. Eldrath was watching, waiting, and the journey, both dangerous and transformative, was only just beginning. And somewhere in the shadows, a howl rose, answering hers and the cubs, a signal that the forest had acknowledged her bravery, and that Kalen's world was about to change forever. The morning light filtered through the high windows of Kalen's fortress, casting long golden beams across the stone floors. The forest below was wrapped in mist, and the soft sound of wolves moving in the distance reminded Leanna that she was far from home. She had slept little, her mind still restless from the events of the previous night. The cub, now a little stronger and more confident, padded around the room and nuzzled her hand. Leanna smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Somehow, even in this strange and powerful place, small comforts remained. Yet the fortress itself was alive with quiet tension. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every stone whispered history, and every howl from the forest carried both warning and promise. Kalen stood at the window, his silhouette tall and commanding. The firelight from the hearth behind him traced the edges of his cloak, making him seem larger than life. He turned slowly, his eyes locking with Leanna's. "Rise," he commanded, his voice deep but not unkind. "There is much you must see." Leanna hesitated, but the determination that had carried her through the forest surged within her. She lifted herself from the bed, the cub following close behind. Kalen gestured for her to follow, and she moved carefully, aware of the weight in his gaze. The corridors of the fortress were unlike anything Leanna had ever seen. Ancient tapestries lined the walls, depicting wolves in all their glory, some standing beside shadowed figures with glowing eyes. Candles flickered in sconces, casting dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. Kalen led her silently, the echo of their footsteps mingling with the faint growls of wolves from hidden chambers. Finally, they arrived at a large hall, where sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, illuminating the dust particles in the air like tiny stars. Kalen stopped at the center and turned to her. "This hall has witnessed centuries of rulership," he said. "Every decision, every act of courage or weakness has been marked here. It is not merely a place of power. It is a place of truth." Leanna's eyes wandered, taking in the carvings along the walls. Wolves in mid-leap, kings with faces stern and regal, and humans intertwined with both magic and shadow. She felt a strange pull, as if the hall itself were speaking to her, urging her to understand something she could not yet name. "Why show me this?" she asked, curiosity coloring her voice. Kalen's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "Because you are not like the others who enter my lands. You act with courage without seeking reward. You save life where others would turn away. This changes the forest, changes me." Leanna's heart fluttered at his words, but a sense of unease lingered. "The forest, it is cursed," she said quietly. "You said so yourself. What kind of danger am I truly in?" Kalen's eyes darkened, and he took a slow step closer. "The forest tests the brave. Shadows move with intention. Some seek to harm, some seek to understand. It has been many years since a human survived long enough to earn my notice, let alone my trust." Leanna's fingers tightened around the cub, who looked up at her with innocent eyes. "And what happens to those who fail?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "They vanish," Kalen said simply. "Some are taken by the forest, others by those who dwell within it. Few return." A chill ran down Leanna's spine, but she squared her shoulders. "I am not afraid," she said, though the words were quieter than she intended. "I saved the cub, and I will survive this forest. I have to." Kalen studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Good. Courage alone will not protect you, but it is a beginning." He led her to a staircase carved from black stone that spiraled upward. At the top, they entered a library unlike any Leanna had ever seen. Shelves of ancient tomes stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with knowledge of herbs, animals, magic, and the history of Eldrath. The air smelled of parchment and pine, with a faint undertone of something older, something alive. "Here, you may learn," Kalen said. "If you wish to understand this forest, the wolves and me, you will need knowledge. But be warned, not all knowledge is comforting." Leanna approached the shelves, her fingers brushing along the spines of books. Some hummed softly under her touch, as if responding to her presence. Others were locked with chains and seals, their secrets guarded fiercely. She pulled down a small volume on forest herbs and opened it, scanning the pages. "Why are you letting me stay here?" she asked. "You could have sent me back to the village while I was unconscious." Kalen leaned against a desk, watching her with his sharp, storm-colored eyes. "Because you do not belong entirely to the world you knew, and because you intrigued me. Your bravery, your compassion, they remind me of something I thought I had lost." Leanna felt a flutter in her chest. The words were strange, almost intimate, yet heavy with meaning she could not yet grasp. She returned to her book, trying to focus, but her thoughts kept drifting to Kalen, the shadows outside, and the cub sleeping peacefully beside her. Hours passed in quiet study. Kalen observed her silently, only speaking occasionally to correct a detail or offer insight. Slowly, an unspoken rhythm formed between them. Teacher and student, ruler and guest, predator and prey. Yet something softer began to bloom. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the library grew dim, and the forest outside darkened into an almost impenetrable shadow. Leanna closed her book and stood, stretching her aching limbs. "I should rest," she said. "It has been a long day." Kalen did not respond immediately. He moved to the window, his silhouette framed against the twilight sky. Then he spoke, voice low and deliberate. "The forest does not rest, and neither do its shadows. If you truly wish to survive, you must understand this." He reached into a small cabinet and drew forth a silver medallion etched with runes. "This belongs to the Alpha line. It carries the bond of the wolves, the curse of the forest, and the power of Eldrath itself. Few are allowed to touch it. Yet," his hand extended toward her, You may see it. Perhaps it will help you understand the danger and the responsibility of what you've entered." Leanna hesitated, her hand hovering above the medallion. She felt a strange warmth radiate from it, and at the same time, a cold whisper that seemed to brush her thoughts like fingers of wind. She placed her hand on the medallion, and a shiver ran through her body. Images flashed before her eyes. Wolves in the mist, shadows moving with intent, humans and kings making choices that echoed across centuries. She gasped, pulling her hand back. It shows so much," she whispered. "I can feel everything. The forest, the wolves, you." Kaylin's eyes darkened with emotion, unreadable yet intense. "It is not merely a vision. It is a warning and a gift. You are now tied in some way to the fate of this forest. And to me." Leanna's heart pounded. "Tied? How? How could I be tied to something so vast, so powerful?" "You saved life when most would have faltered," Kaylin said softly. "That act has consequences. The forest recognizes bravery. The wolves recognize courage, and I recognize strength of heart. You are no longer merely human in this place. You have been marked, whether you understand it yet or not." Before she could respond, a sudden howl pierced the air, a long, mournful cry that echoed through the fortress and the forest beyond. The cub leapt to its feet, ears perked, growling softly. Leanna froze, her pulse racing. Kaylin's expression hardened. "The forest speaks," he said, "and it warns of approaching shadows. They come for those who enter uninvited, and some shadows are bound by more than hunger. They are bound by darkness, by curses older than time." Leanna looked to him, fear and determination mingling in her eyes. "What do? "We wait, and we prepare," Kaylin said. "You have courage, but courage alone will not save you. You must trust, and you must act. The forest will test you as it tests all who enter, and you will learn whether you are ready." The evening deepened, and shadows crept along the walls of the fortress. Leanna felt the weight of every choice she had made, venturing into the forest, saving the cub, and now standing in the heart of a power older than her imagination. The medallion on the desk gleamed softly, as if alive, and she sensed that the true challenges had only just begun. As night fell completely, Kaylin led her back to her chamber. The cub curled at the foot of the bed, and Leanna sat quietly, lost in thought. The fortress was silent, yet the tension in the air was palpable. She had glimpsed only a fraction of the forest's mysteries, and she knew that every moment of her life from now on would be shaped by what she had begun in that misty clearing. Before sleep took her, she saw Kaylin standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable, yet his gaze lingered on her longer than it should have. "Rest well," he said quietly. "Tomorrow the forest will speak again, and we must be ready to answer." Leanna lay down, her thoughts a storm of curiosity, fear, and something unnameable stirring in her chest. Outside, the wind whispered through the fortress walls, carrying the howl of wolves and the echo of shadows. She understood now. Her life was no longer entirely her own. And in the silence of the night she felt the pull of destiny, a bond with the Alpha King, with the forest, and with the shadows yet to come. And somewhere beyond the walls, deep in the mist, the darkness shifted, watching, waiting, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. The night was thick with mist, and the wind carried the scent of pine, smoke, and distant danger. The forest outside Kaylin's fortress was alive in ways Leanna could feel in her bones. Shadows moved between the trees, long and twisting, and the low growls of wolves echoed through the cliffs, a warning and a promise at once. The small wolf cub, now more alert and protective, stayed close to her side as she paced her chamber, her heart heavy with both fear and resolve. She could not shake the sense that something was coming, something that tested her courage and would reveal the truth of the bond she had begun to share with Kaelin. The Alpha King had warned her that the forest tested the brave, yet she did not fully understand what that meant until now. A soft knock on the door broke her reverie. The cub growled low in warning. "Enter," Kaelin's voice called. He stepped into the room, silent and commanding, like a shadow moving in the moonlight. His cloak whispered against the floor, and his eyes, storm-colored and intense, met hers. "The shadows approach," he said quietly. "I can feel them pressing against the fortress. They do not come for you alone. They come for the forest, for me, and for all that binds us to this land." Lyanna swallowed hard, gripping the cub. "What do we do? How can I help?" Kaelin studied her, his gaze unreadable. Then slowly he walked closer. "You have something within you that most humans do not. Compassion, courage, the ability to act when others would falter. The forest has recognized this, and that recognition has tied your fate to mine. Tonight, we face the consequence of that bond." Lyanna felt a shiver run down her spine. The weight of her actions, the rescue of the cub, her venture into the cursed forest, pressed upon her like the dense fog outside. And yet, beneath the fear, a strange resolve began to burn. She would not falter. The fortress doors creaked open, and Kaelin led her to the battlements. Below, the forest seemed to writhe with life, shadows twisting unnaturally among the trees. Wolves prowled the edges of the cliffs, eyes glowing in the mist. Lyanna could feel the power radiating from them, from Kaelin, and from the land itself. "Stay close," Kaelin instructed. "The shadows are not mindless. They are bound to darkness, yes, but they are cunning. We must act carefully." Lyanna nodded, gripping his arm instinctively. There was an unspoken trust between them now. Fragile, yet undeniable. She could feel the pulse of his strength, his control, and his power, and she realized that she did not fear him. But something deeper stirred within her, awe, respect, and a strange longing she could not yet name. From the forest, a howl rose, long and mournful, followed by another and another. The shadows began to coalesce, forming shapes that moved with unnatural grace. Dark figures, neither fully human nor fully animal, emerged from the mist. Their eyes glowed with malevolence, and they advanced toward the fortress like tides of darkness. Kaelin placed a hand on her shoulder. "Now," he said, "stay behind me. Trust in what we have learned, and trust in yourself." Lyanna's heart raced, but she nodded. She felt the cub brush against her legs, and she knew she had to act, not merely as an observer, but as a participant in this battle for life, for the forest, and for the bond that had begun between her and Kaelin. The battle was swift and fierce. Shadows lunged at the fortress walls, only to be met by the wolves' teeth and Kaelin's commanding presence. Lyanna observed, then remembered the herbs she had gathered, the knowledge of healing and nature she carried in her mind. Quickly she gathered roots and leaves from a nearby tray, crushing them into poultices and powders. Kaelin glanced at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "You will act?" he asked. "I must," Lyanna said firmly. "The forest gave me strength. I can help." Together they worked. Kaelin directed the wolves, using his voice and gestures to guide them. Lyanna mixed herbs with water, sprinkling them over the shadows. To her amazement, the shadows recoiled, writhing as if burned, then retreated into the mist. It was not brute strength that defeated them. It was courage, wisdom, and the human heart that acted without hesitation. The cub, now emboldened, darted between the wolves and the shadows, its small body fearless, a reminder of why Lyanna had entered the forest in the first place. Each movement of hers and Kalen's was in rhythm, an unspoken dance of trust and instinct. Finally, the last shadow screamed and dissolved into the fog, leaving the forest eerily silent. The wolves howled in unison, a mournful yet victorious sound that echoed across the cliffs. Lyanna sank to her knees, exhausted but alive. Kalen came to her side, his expression softer than she had ever seen. "You acted with courage beyond the ordinary," he said, his voice carrying both pride and something deeper, more intimate. "You saved the forest, the cub, and perhaps even me." Lyanna looked up at him, her chest heaving. "I didn't know I could do it," she admitted. "I just couldn't stand by." Kalen extended his hand, helping her to her feet. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world around them, the fortress, the forest, the mist, fell away. Only the bond between them remained, fragile, yet undeniable. "You have changed this place," he said softly, "and you have changed me." In the quiet that followed, Kalen led her back to the hall where the medallion lay. Lyanna touched it again, feeling the pulse of the forest, the bond with the wolves, and the invisible threads that now tied her fate to Kalen's. "The curse of this land," Kalen explained, "was never meant to destroy. It was meant to isolate, to test, to shape those who enter. You have faced it, and you have shown that love and courage can break even the oldest shadows." Lyanna listened, understanding dawning in her heart. She had come to the forest to help, to heal, and to save a small life, and in doing so, she had confronted forces she did not fully comprehend. And yet, in the confrontation, she had discovered a strength she did not know she possessed. Kalen's gaze lingered on her. "I have lived long in this forest, bound by duty and power. I believed I could not love, that no one could withstand the darkness here, but you have shown me that even in shadow, light can exist." Lyanna's heart fluttered. I don't know what to say." "Then say nothing," Kalen replied. "Let your actions speak, as they always have." The night deepened, and Lyanna and Kalen stood together on the battlements once more. The forest below was still, save for the quiet movement of wolves patrolling the edges. The cub, now asleep at her feet, had grown braver, a living symbol of courage rewarded. "I never imagined that saving a small creature could lead to this," Lyanna said, her voice soft. "Nor did I," Kalen admitted. "Yet here we are. The bond we share is no longer merely of human and wolf or of ruler and subject. It is something older, something enduring. It is a bond forged in courage, trust, and the willingness to face shadows together." Lyanna looked at him, the words stirring something she had not allowed herself to feel before. A deep, quiet longing, a recognition that she belonged here, in this place of power, shadow, and trust. Kalen reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "The forest may test us again," he said softly. "But I know now that together we can endure anything. Courage has brought you here, and compassion has bound us. We are stronger because of it." Lyanna felt a warmth spread through her chest, a connection deeper than fear, deeper than gratitude. "Then we face it together," she said. "Yes," Kalen replied, his hand still near hers. "Together." The first light of dawn began to break over the misty cliffs. The shadows of the forest retreated with the night, but the memory of their threat lingered. Lyanna understood that life in Eldrath would never be ordinary again. Yet she also knew that for the first time in her life, she had a purpose beyond survival, a purpose intertwined with courage, love, and the protection of life, both human and beast. As the sun's rays illuminated the fortress, Kalen stood beside her, tall and resolute, yet softened by something she could not yet name. The bond they had forged was no longer tentative, it was real, and it was enduring. And though the forest would always hold shadows, and though dangers might return, Leanna now knew that light and courage could prevail. The cub stirred, nuzzling her hand once more. Leanna smiled, brushing its fur gently. Kalen's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, a silent promise that he would remain by her side, through shadow and light, through trials and triumphs. Together they looked out over the misty forest. The battle was over, but their story, their journey, their bond, their shared courage was only beginning. The Alpha King and the Healer, the forest and its shadows, the cub and the human. They were connected now forever by bravery, trust, and the quiet, enduring power of love. And somewhere deep within the forest, a soft howl rose, not of warning, but of acknowledgement. The forest had witnessed courage, and in doing so, it had changed forever.